My husband's mistress walked into our business anniversary gala wearing my grandmother's sapphire necklace. "Stunning piece, isn't it?" She smirked, expecting a scene. Instead, I calmly opened my portfolio. "You should see these documents," I said. "They prove who actually built and owns this company." Gordon's face turned ashen as investors became witnesses. I stood motionless by the champagne fountain, the crystal flute nearly slipping from my fingers as Shiloh Patterson sauntered through the ballroom doors of the Grand Meridian Hotel. At 32, she was everything I wasn't at 47, young, uninhibited, with the casual confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But it wasn't her presence that froze the breath in my lungs. It was the gleaming sapphire and diamond necklace cascading down her throat, my grandmother's heirloom, the one I'd reported missing from my jewelry box 3 months ago. The necklace that Gordon, my husband of 22 years, had tearfully helped me search for throughout our lakeside mansion. Across the room, Gordon was deep in conversation with Fred Holloway, our company's most significant investor. They were laughing, Gordon's hand clasped on Fred's shoulder, the picture of success and camaraderie. Neither had noticed Shiloh's entrance yet, though heads were turning throughout the ballroom. She'd made sure of that with her entrance, a calculated disruption to what should have been the crowning evening of my career. Tonight was the 20th anniversary of Westlake Innovations, the pharmaceutical research company I'd built from a single-room lab into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Though if you asked anyone in the industry, they'd tell you Gordon Williams was the visionary founder, the charismatic CEO whose face graced biotech magazines and industry panels. I was just the supportive wife with a biochemistry background who helped out in the early days. The truth was far different, but I'd spent 2 decades allowing that narrative to flourish. Until now. I watched as Gordon finally spotted Shiloh. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a micro-flash of panic quickly replaced by practiced nonchalance. He whispered something to Fred, patted his back, and began making his way across the room. Not toward Shiloh, but toward me. Damage control. Quite a turnout, Gordon said, slipping his arm around my waist. At 49, he remained handsome in the distinguished way that brought respectful nods from men and lingering gazes from women. His custom-tailored tuxedo concealed the slight softening of his once athletic build. "Everyone who matters in biotech is here tonight." "Almost everyone," I replied, my tone even as I sipped my champagne. "Miranda Jacobson from the FDA Regulatory Committee hasn't arrived yet." Gordon's grip on my waist tightened slightly. Miranda was crucial to the approval process for our newest drug compound, a breakthrough cancer treatment that I'd spent the last 5 years developing. What Gordon didn't know was that Miranda and I had already met privately the previous week. She was precisely where she needed to be. "She'll be here," he assured me, scanning the room. "Tonight's too important to miss." Indeed it was, though not for the reasons he believed. I'd spent the past 7 months preparing for this evening, ever since the day I discovered Gordon's betrayal. Not just of our marriage, but of my life's work. My eyes drifted to the small portfolio clutch I'd placed on a nearby table. Inside was everything I needed to reclaim what was mine. "You should mingle," Gordon suggested, his thumb tracing small circles on my hip, a gesture that once made me feel cherished but now registered as possession. "The Wilsons were asking about you earlier." I nodded, offering the smile I'd perfected for industry gatherings, warm but professional. "I'll find them. You should check on the presentation setup. We go live in 40 minutes. He kissed my cheek, his cologne, different from his usual scent, lingering as he pulled away. Another small betrayal in a mountain of deceptions. I watched him move through the crowd, accepting congratulations and shaking hands as he went. He deliberately took a path that avoided Shiloh's location near the bar. As soon as Gordon was occupied with the tech crew, I saw Shiloh begin making her way toward me. Her navy gown, clearly chosen to complement the sapphires around her neck, flowed around her like liquid midnight. My grandmother's necklace caught the light with each step she took. The piece Gordon had sworn must have been lost during our trip to Vancouver last winter. "Mrs. Williams," she greeted with practiced sweetness. "What a beautiful event." 20 years is quite an achievement. I met her gaze steadily. "It is, Shiloh. Though I'm surprised to see you here. I don't recall your name on the guest list." Her smile didn't falter. "Gordon thought it would be nice to have all of financial operations represented. As department head, I felt it was my responsibility to attend." Department head, a position she'd held for less than a year, having risen with remarkable speed through the company ranks under Gordon's direct mentorship. A position I had suggested should go to Donna Marshall, who had been with us for 12 years and knew our financial systems inside out. "That necklace is stunning," I said, my voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "Sapphires are such a statement piece." Her hand moved instinctively to touch the central stone, a deep blue cushion-cut sapphire surrounded by diamonds, set in platinum that had been in my family for 3 generations. "Thank you," she replied, a hint of challenge in her eyes. "It was a gift. Quite special, I'm told." "I'm sure it is," I agreed. "My grandmother received it from my grandfather when they fled Europe during the war. The sapphire was originally part of a collection belonging to a noble family in Vienna. It survived when many of their other possessions didn't." Confusion flickered across her features. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected, not anger or tears or a public scene that would make me appear unstable. "It's a beautiful story," she managed, her confidence wavering. "Yes," I said, reaching for my portfolio clutch, "but not nearly as interesting as some of the stories I could tell about Westlake Innovations, about who really developed the HLR-237 compound that's about to make this company billions, about who holds the original research patents in their name alone." I withdrew a slim folder bearing the logo of Sanderson and Wright, one of the most respected law firms in the country. "Or perhaps you'd be interested in the financial documentation showing how Gordon has been systematically restructuring company ownership for the past year, removing my name from key holdings despite my initial investment that launched everything we've built." Shiloh's eyes widened as she glanced between me and the folder. "You might want to ask Gordon about what happens when someone challenges the original patent holder," I continued calmly, "particularly when that patent holder kept meticulous records of every research development, every investment decision, and every board meeting for the past 20 years. Around us, conversations had quieted as guests sensed the tension radiating from our exchange. From across the room, I saw Gordon notice the interaction. His practiced smile faltered as he excused himself from his current conversation and began moving purposefully in our direction. Too late. The first domino was already falling. 3 hours earlier, I'd stood in my walk-in closet, sliding diamond earrings into place while studying my reflection in the full-length mirror. The emerald green gown I'd chosen for tonight hugged my figure in a way that felt both powerful and elegant. A silhouette that reminded me that at 47, Susie Williams still commanded attention when she wanted to. I'd selected this dress specifically for tonight, rejecting the softer, more feminine black dress Gordon had casually suggested. "The black would be lovely with your pearls," he'd said last week, his tone nonchalant as he reviewed quarterly reports in his home office. Those pearls, a 10th anniversary gift, were beautiful but demure. Tonight wasn't about being demure. "Mrs. Williams, the car will be ready in 20 minutes, called Donna, our housekeeper, from the hallway. "And the package you were expecting has arrived." "Thank you, Donna," I replied, reaching for the crystal perfume bottle on my vanity. 2 spritzes of chandelure. Not my usual scent, but one I'd purchased specifically for this evening. Everything about tonight was deliberate, carefully orchestrated. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. Documentation delivered to Sanderson. All set for tonight. I allowed myself a small smile. Miranda Jacobson, FDA Regulatory Affairs Director, by day, had become an unexpected ally in my careful investigation. We'd met 5 years ago during the initial approval process for Westlake's breakthrough immunotherapy drug, my creation, though the industry praised Gordon for the innovation. Miranda had seen through the facade immediately, recognizing a fellow woman whose intellectual contributions were being systematically overshadowed. My eyes drifted to the empty space in my jewelry box where my grandmother's sapphire necklace should have been. Its absence was a constant reminder of how thoroughly I'd been betrayed, not just by my husband's infidelity, but by his audacity. Taking a family heirloom to gift to his mistress crossed a line I couldn't forgive. I remembered the moment I'd discovered it was missing. 3 months ago, preparing for a charity gala, I'd opened the velvet box to find it empty. Gordon had appeared genuinely distressed, helping me search, even suggesting we file a police report. "It's irreplaceable, Susie," he'd said, holding me while I cried. "We'll find it, I promise." His performance had been flawless. Almost. The first red flag had been subtle, a transaction on our joint credit card statement for a safety deposit box I knew nothing about. When questioned, Gordon explained it away as secure storage for sensitive company documents. I'd nodded, accepting his explanation while making a mental note to investigate further. The second flag came during a company fundraiser last month, when I overheard one executive congratulate Gordon on restructuring the ownership model, a model I supposedly had equal say in as co-founder. But the moment everything crystallized was 6 weeks ago. I'd stayed late at the lab, finalizing tests on our newest compound. Returning to Gordon's office to leave the results on his desk, a courtesy I'd maintained despite our increasingly separate professional lives, I found his computer unlocked. A half-finished email to our corporate attorney was open on the screen. Regarding Mrs. Williams' ownership stake, I believe we've found a viable approach through Section 7 of the original partnership agreement. Please finalize the paperwork before the anniversary announcement. Once the transition is complete, Shiloh can be moved into the CFO position as discussed. I read it 3 times, my hand steady on the mouse despite the earthquake happening inside me. 22 years of marriage. 20 years building Westlake Innovations from a concept born in my graduate research to a pharmaceutical powerhouse. All being systematically dismantled through legal machinations. Instead of confronting Gordon immediately, I'd sat in his leather chair, staring out at the Seattle skyline as twilight settled over the city. The anger that washed through me wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold, clarifying. This betrayal wasn't just personal, it was calculated corporate theft. That night, I'd driven home and performed my usual routine. Dinner conversation about inconsequential matters, a glass of wine while reviewing reports, the practice dance of a long marriage. But inside, everything had shifted. I was no longer just Gordon Williams's wife and silent partner. I had become his opponent. The following morning, I'd contacted Jasmine Sanderson, a razor-sharp attorney known for her expertise in intellectual property and corporate law. "Bring everything," she'd instructed during our initial phone call. "Every notebook, every early patent filing, every email showing your contributions. We'll need it all." For the next month, I'd meticulously gathered evidence while maintaining a perfect facade of normalcy. The original research notebooks from my postdoctoral work that had become Westlake's foundation. Email threads showing my development of the key compounds. Documentation of my family's initial $250,000 investment that had launched the company while Gordon was still finishing his MBA. Most damning were the original patent filings for our 3 most profitable drug compounds, all listing me as principal, researcher, though current company materials credited Gordon with the breakthroughs. "Ready, Mrs. Williams?" Donna asked, appearing in the doorway, pulling me back to the present. She'd worked for us for 15 years, witnessing the slow erosion of my marriage while maintaining a respectful silence. But I'd noticed her watchful eyes, the way she'd begun leaving business articles on my desk that highlighted women reclaiming their professional due. "Almost," I replied, reaching for the portfolio clutch on my vanity, the one containing selective copies of the documents Jasmine had helped me prepare. The originals were safe with the law firm, with instructions for their use if tonight didn't. "Go as planned." I took one final look in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the accommodating scientist who had gradually allowed herself to be sidelined in her own company. Tonight, Susie Williams was reclaiming everything: her company, her dignity, and her future. As I descended the curved staircase of our lakeside mansion, Gordon waited in the foyer, handsome in his tuxedo, checking his watch with practiced impatience. "You look stunning," he said, his eyes appreciative as they swept over my form. For a moment, I glimpsed the young man I'd fallen in love with in graduate school. Brilliant, ambitious, seemingly in awe of both my mind and body. Before success had twisted his ambition into something darker. "The most important night in Westlake's history," he continued, helping me with my wrap. "By tomorrow morning, once we announce the FDA fast-track approval, our stock will soar." I smiled, allowing him to guide me toward the waiting town car. "Yes," I agreed quietly. "Everything will certainly be different tomorrow." He had no idea how right he was. I remembered the exact moment everything changed between us. It wasn't when I discovered Gordon's affair. In retrospect, I should have recognized the signs years earlier. It wasn't even when I found my grandmother's necklace missing. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, rain streaming down the windows, of my private lab at Westlake's research facility. I'd been reviewing the final trial data for HLR-237, our breakthrough cancer treatment. The compound had been my obsession for 5 years, a unique approach to targeted therapy that showed remarkable results in treatment-resistant cases. The data confirmed what I'd hypothesized. We had a game-changer on our hands. Excited, I'd gathered my notes and headed to Gordon's executive suite to share the news. His assistant's desk was empty, so I knocked lightly on his door before entering. The sight that greeted me wasn't what I expected. Gordon was standing by the window, phone to his ear, his back to the door. "The data exceeds all expectations," he was saying, his voice animated in a way it rarely was anymore. "My research team has outdone themselves. Once the FDA gives approval, we're looking at potential annual revenue of $3 billion within 5 years." I paused in the doorway, data clutched to my chest. My research team. 2 words that erased my individual contribution. "The compound is completely proprietary. My design from the molecular level up," he continued. "We're filing additional patents next week to lock down every possible application." The casual lie stunned me into stillness. HLR-237 had been conceived during a sleepless night in my home lab 4 years ago, the molecular structure sketched on a notepad beside my bed. Every iteration, every test, every breakthrough had come from my work, with my hand-picked research team. Gordon had provided business guidance, certainly, but the science, the innovation at the heart of Westlake, had always been mine. "I need to finalize the press approach," Gordon said to whoever was on the other end of the call. "When the announcement breaks, I want every major publication to have the full background on how I developed this treatment." I stepped back silently, closing the door without making my presence known. In the empty hallway, I leaned against the wall, data sheets trembling slightly in my hands. This wasn't just taking credit in a vague corporate way. This was systematic. Erasure of my contributions. That evening at home, Gordon had been unusually attentive, bringing me a glass of wine in my study. "How's the final analysis coming?" he'd asked casually. Promising, I replied, watching him carefully. The results validate everything we've been working toward. Excellent, he said, squeezing my shoulder. I've already prepared the board for a major announcement. Just need your final report to back up what I've been telling them. And what have you been telling them? I asked, keeping my tone light. Gordon smiled, a flash of his signature charm. That my brilliant wife has been instrumental in supporting the research division's work on this project. Supporting. Not leading, not creating, not inventing. Supporting. After. He left. I opened my laptop and began searching through company communications. What I found was a systematic pattern of diminishment. Press releases over the years that gradually shifted credit for innovations from Dr. Susie Williams' research team to Westlake's research division under CEO Gordon Williams' direction. Scientific papers where my name had moved from lead author to second or third position, despite my central role. Most disturbing was a draft of the upcoming annual report, where a feature on HLR 237 described it as the culmination of CEO Gordon Williams' vision for targeted cancer therapies, developed under his guidance. My name appeared only once, buried in a paragraph about the research team. I'd closed the laptop, mind racing. This wasn't just vanity or credit stealing. This was groundwork for something more sinister. By systematically removing me from the company narrative, Gordon was creating a corporate history where my contributions were minimized or erased entirely. The following morning, I'd accessed our shared investment account, reviewing the transaction history with new eyes. Over the past 18 months, Gordon had been gradually restructuring our holdings, moving assets from joint ownership into funds and trusts in his name only. Small moves, nothing that would raise immediate alarms, but together forming a pattern of financial separation. A cold weight settled in my stomach as the pieces connected. The ownership restructuring, the credit for HLR 237, the gradual separation of our finances. Gordon wasn't just having an affair. He was preparing to cut me out completely, professionally, and financially. That day, I'd made an appointment with the bank to review all of our accounts and safe deposit boxes. The bank manager, who had worked with us for years, seemed uncomfortable when I asked about the new safe deposit box Gordon had opened 3 months earlier. I believe Mr. Williams intended that as a surprise, Mrs. Williams, he'd said hesitantly. I'm sure he did, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. But as his wife and business partner, I need full access to all our accounts and holdings. After some hesitation and verification of my legal rights as a joint account holder, he provided the access. The box contained exactly what I suspected: legal documents outlining a corporate restructuring that would reduce my ownership stake in Westlake to a minor holding, while maintaining my liability for the company's operations. Buried in the legal language was a clause that would trigger if I contested the changes, potentially forcing a sale of my remaining shares at a predetermined price. It wasn't just betrayal, it was calculated corporate theft, using our marriage as the vehicle. Also in the box was a jewelry appraisal for my grandmother's sapphire necklace, dated 2 months earlier. The appraisal included photographs and a detailed description, prepared for insurance purposes. The document listed Gordon Williams as the sole owner. I'd taken photographs of everything with my phone before carefully replacing the documents exactly as I'd found them. On the drive back to our house, I'd made another call, this time to Daniel Wright, an old college friend who had become one of the top forensic accountants in Seattle. I need someone discreet and thorough, I told him. Someone who can trace financial movements without alerting the subject. Sounds serious, Susie, Daniel had replied, concern evident in his voice. Is everything okay? Not yet, I admitted. But it will be. That night, lying beside Gordon in our king-sized bed, listening to his even breathing, I made my decision. This wasn't just about saving my marriage or even my pride. It was about protecting what I'd built, the company, the innovations, my life's work. I wouldn't confront Gordon immediately. I wouldn't give him the opportunity to accelerate whatever plan he was implementing or to conceal evidence. Instead, I would become the scientist I'd always been, methodical, patient, gathering data before reaching a conclusion. And then I would act. The investigation began with a single thread, the missing necklace, but quickly unraveled into a complex web of deception that spanned both our marriage and our company. Daniel Wright proved to be more valuable than I could have anticipated. After signing a confidentiality agreement, he began tracing the financial maneuvers Gordon had implemented over the past 2 years. "It's sophisticated," Daniel explained 3 weeks after I'd hired him, spreading documents across my private office. At home. I'd told Gordon I was converting the space into a personal library. He never entered it anyway. He's been moving small amounts through multiple channels, restructuring ownership in ways that wouldn't trigger attention. "How bad is it?" I asked, scanning the flowcharts Daniel had created. "If you hadn't caught it now," Daniel shook his head grimly, "within 6 months, your ownership stake would have been reduced to under 15%. Despite being a founding partner, the structure would have made it nearly impossible to challenge without selling your remaining shares." I studied the documentation, my biochemist's mind adapting to follow the financial pathways. "And the offshore accounts?" Daniel tapped a folder labeled Cayman Holdings. "That's where it gets interesting. There are transfers moving into a shell corporation that appears to be jointly owned by Gordon and someone named Shiloh Patterson." The name hit me like a physical blow. Shiloh Patterson had joined Westlake 18 months ago as a financial analyst, young, ambitious, with a resume that looked impressive on paper. Gordon had personally championed her rapid promotion to head of financial operations, overruling my suggestion to promote Donna Marshall, our longtime finance deputy. "I need everything you can find on Shiloh Patterson," I told Daniel, keeping my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. The following week, I received a comprehensive background report. Shiloh's impressive resume contained subtle but significant embellishments. Her MBA from Wharton was real, but her claimed distinction honors were not. Her previous employment at a pharmaceutical competitor included a departure under circumstances that had been carefully managed, a settlement agreement that prevented either party from discussing the terms. Most revealing was her connection to Gordon. They had attended the same undergraduate business program at Northwestern, though 10 years apart. Her uncle had been Gordon's faculty advisor and remained a close friend. This connection was conspicuously absent from her employment application. With this thread to pull, I began my own careful surveillance. I installed a tracking app on Gordon's phone under the guise of a security update from our IT department. I set up alerts for his credit card, transactions. I began logging his late nights and weekend emergency meetings. The pattern that emerged was as predictable as it was painful. Regular Wednesday evening, client dinners at the Fairview Hotel downtown. Weekend golf retreats that showed no corresponding charges at any golf courses. Late-night calls from his study that ended abruptly when I approached. After 3 weeks of tracking, I had confirmation of what I already suspected. Gordon and Shiloh were involved romantically, using company time and resources to conduct their affair. But the betrayal ran deeper than infidelity. Email records Daniel recovered showed Gordon and Shiloh discussing the company's future, specifically, a 5-year plan that involved transitioning leadership once the ownership restructuring was complete. My name appeared in these conversations not as a partner but as an obstacle to be managed. "Once Susie's out of the picture," Gordon had written in one email, "we can implement the full reorganization. The board will follow my lead on the succession plan." Succession plan. As if I were being retired rather than systematically pushed out of my own company. The most damning evidence came from Jasmine Sanderson's legal team, who discovered draft documents for a major company restructuring scheduled to be announced at the upcoming anniversary gala. The paperwork would establish Gordon as the sole founding visionary of Westlake, with a corporate history that minimized my role to that of an early employee rather than co-founder and key innovator. This isn't just unethical, Jasmine told me, during a secure call from her car. It potentially crosses into illegal territory, particularly regarding the intellectual property claims. The patents for your 3 major drug compounds were filed with you as principal researcher, but these documents attempt to retroactively assign full ownership to the corporation under Gordon's direction. Can they do that? I asked, pacing my home office, phone clutched to my ear. They're trying, Jasmine replied, but we have the original filings, your research notebooks, and enough documentation to block it, if we move quickly. That evening, I made my way to the research facility, using my still valid credentials to access my old laboratory after hours. Most of my current work had moved to the executive building as I took on more administrative responsibilities, but I had maintained this space for special projects. Behind a secured panel in the lab's storage room was a fireproof safe containing my original research notebooks, 20 years of innovations, formulations, and breakthroughs, all documented in my precise handwriting. These notebooks were the backbone of Westlake's intellectual property, the genesis of treatments that had saved countless lives and generated billions in revenue. I carefully photographed key pages, focusing on the development process for our 3 most profitable drug compounds. The notebooks themselves would remain in place. Removing them might alert Gordon that I was aware of his plans, but the digital evidence would be crucial to establishing my role as the primary innovator. As I worked, a text message from Miranda Jacobson arrived. Just left MTG with GW. He's claiming sole developer status on HLR 237 for FDA fast-track application. No mention of your work. Documentation? I felt a surge of cold anger. The FDA application was the final piece. Once Gordon established himself as the sole developer in regulatory filings, challenging his version of events would become exponentially more difficult. I texted back, sending original research notebooks and development timeline tonight. Can you delay application processing? Miranda's response came quickly. Consider it flagged for additional review. You have 72 hours before I need to move it forward. 3 days to compile 20 years of evidence. 3 days to prepare for a confrontation that would either salvage my life's work or leave me professionally and personally devastated. That night, I created a secure digital vault containing everything I had gathered: financial records showing my initial investment that launched Westlake, patent applications listing me as principal researcher, email correspondence documenting my role in key innovations, and testimonials from early research team members confirming my leadership. I also documented the financial irregularities Daniel had uncovered, the gradual restructuring of company ownership, the offshore accounts Gordon had established with Shiloh, the planned announcement that would effectively erase me from Westlake's history. By morning, I had a comprehensive dossier that told the true story of Westlake Innovations. Not the revised history Gordon planned to present at our anniversary gala, but the reality of a company built on my scientific breakthroughs and partially funded by my family's investment. The final piece came unexpectedly. While searching for additional documentation in our home office, I discovered a small velvet pouch tucked into the back of Gordon's desk drawer. Inside was a receipt from Vartanian Jewelers for cleaning and sizing a sapphire and diamond necklace, platinum setting, dated just 3 weeks earlier. The receipt included the customer's phone, number Shiloh Patterson's cell. My grandmother's necklace hadn't been lost or stolen. Gordon had taken it deliberately to give to his mistress, perhaps the most personal betrayal in a tapestry of deception that spanned our marriage and our company. I photographed the receipt before carefully returning everything exactly as I had found it. Then I made 2 calls, one to Jasmine Sanderson, finalizing our legal strategy, and one to Miranda Jacobson, confirming that she would attend the anniversary gala the following evening. The trap was set. All that remained was for Gordon and Shiloh to walk into it. The full magnitude of Gordon's betrayal became clear exactly 7 days before the anniversary gala. I had arranged to have lunch with Dr. Lawrence Kessler, the retired biochemist who had been my doctoral advisor at Stanford and had later served as an early consultant for Westlake. Larry had always been a mentor and friend, someone who had recognized my potential when many others overlooked the quiet woman in the laboratory. We met at a small cafe near his lakeside home, far from Westlake's corporate offices and unlikely to be frequented by anyone connected to the company. At 78, Larry was still sharp-minded, his eyes bright behind wire-rimmed glasses as he studied my face across the table. "You didn't invite me to lunch to discuss the weather, Susie," he said, after our initial pleasantries. "What's troubling you?" I hesitated, then pushed a folder across the table. "I need your perspective on something, Larry, as someone who was there at the beginning." Inside was a draft of the anniversary press packet Gordon had prepared, the official history of Westlake Innovations that would be distributed to media outlets following our gala announcement. I had accessed it through Miranda's FDA contacts, who had received an advance copy as part of the promotional materials for HLR 237's fast-track approval. Larry adjusted his glasses and began reading, his expression gradually hardening as he made his way through the document. When he looked up, there was barely contained anger in his eyes. "This is fiction," he said flatly. "Revisionist history of the worst kind." The document described Gordon as the visionary founder who had conceptualized the unique approach to molecular targeting that became Westlake's signature methodology. My role was reduced to that of early research support, a footnote in the company's creation myth rather than its scientific architect. "It was your breakthrough with recombinant protein targeting that launched everything," Larry said, tapping the paper with indignation. Gordon was the business student who happened to be dating the brilliant scientist. He couldn't explain a phospholipid pathway if his life depended on it. I felt a strange calm settle over me, hearing my private suspicions confirmed by someone who had witnessed our early days. "The history is being rewritten, Larry, not just in press materials. Legal documents, patent applications, corporate filings. Gordon is systematically erasing my contributions." Larry's face flushed with anger. "This isn't just unethical, Susie. It's academic and scientific fraud." "It's also nearly complete," I replied quietly. "Unless I can definitively prove my role as the scientific founder, the revised history becomes reality once it's announced at the gala." Larry removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "What do you need from me?" "Your records," I said. "Any documentation you have from Westlake's early days, consultation notes, research reviews, meeting minutes. Anything that clearly establishes my role as the scientific developer." He nodded slowly. "I kept everything, you know. Professional habit, including the napkin from that cafe near campus where you first sketched the molecular pathway that eventually became RL-519. RL-519, our first major drug, named for receptor ligand compound Thupper 519, the one that had put Westlake on the map 15 years ago. The napkin Larry mentioned was a piece of scientific history, my spontaneous insight during a coffee meeting that had led to our patented approach to receptor targeting. Gordon has claimed in regulatory filings that he developed the concept during his business school research, I said, watching Larry's expression shift from surprise to outrage. "That's absurd. He wasn't even present that day. It was you, me, and Dr. Yamamoto from Biochem." Larry shook his head in disbelief. "I still have the napkin with your handwriting, dated and witnessed by both of us." "I need it, Larry, and anything else you have." 2 days later, I received a secure package from Larry containing a treasure trove of documentation. The original napkin preserved in a plastic sleeve, consultation reports clearly identifying me as the research lead, early meeting minutes where Gordon was referred to as the business liaison, while I was titled scientific founder, and photographs from our first laboratory where I was clearly shown directing the research team. Most damning was a letter Gordon himself had written to Larry 10 years ago, thanking him for recognizing Susie's extraordinary talent and guiding her breakthrough research that made Westlake possible. The letter, on official company letterhead, directly contradicted the narrative Gordon now sought to establish. With Larry's materials added to my growing evidence file, I confronted the most personally painful aspect of Gordon's betrayal, his relationship with Shiloh and their joint plan to assume control of Westlake. Daniel had managed to recover deleted emails from the company server, revealing conversations between Gordon and Shiloh dating back 14 months. Their relationship had begun shortly after her hire, their corporate conspiracy developing alongside their affair. "Once the restructuring is complete, we'll announce your promotion to CFO," Gordon had written 3 months earlier. "After a suitable transition period, you'll be positioned for COO when we take the company in its new direction." Another email outlined their personal plans. "After things settle with the Susie situation, we should look at properties on Mercer Island. Time for a fresh start without daily reminders." The Susie situation. 22 years of marriage and partnership reduced to a situation to be managed and resolved. I felt a strange detachment reading these exchanges, as if they were about characters in a novel rather than my own life. The scientist in me observed the evidence dispassionately, noting patterns and calculating probabilities. But occasionally, when I was alone in my home office late at night, the full emotional impact would hit me. The betrayal not just of our marriage vows, but of our shared dream. The company we had built together from nothing. Those moments of weakness never lasted long. By morning, resolve would replace hurt, determination overshadowing betrayal. This wasn't just about a failing marriage or a midlife affair. This was about my life's work, my scientific legacy, my rightful place as the innovative force behind Westlake. The final piece of the puzzle came from Miranda Jacobson at the FDA. She had accessed the full regulatory submission for HLR 237's fast-track approval, a document that officially listed Gordon Williams as the primary developer and scientific lead for the breakthrough compound. He submitted altered research documentation, Miranda told me during a secure call from her car. "The progression reports have been edited to minimize your role. Original lab notes have been selectively transcribed, omitting key sections that demonstrate your development of the compound." "That crosses the line into fraud," I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. "Exactly why I've flagged it for comprehensive review," Miranda confirmed. "But, Susie, you should know, the approval is still likely to go through. The scientific merit of HLR 237 is undeniable, regardless of who gets credit." "The approval should go through," I agreed. "Patients need this treatment, but the credit belongs with the actual developer." "You need to act quickly," Miranda warned. "Once these submissions become part of the official record, challenging the narrative becomes exponentially more difficult." That night, I finalized my strategy with Jasmine Sanderson. The anniversary gala would provide the perfect opportunity to confront Gordon's deception publicly, with key industry figures, board members, and investors as witnesses. "We'll have copies of the complete evidence package for the board members," Jasmine confirmed. "The moment you give the signal, my associates will distribute them." "And the temporary injunction?" "Ready to file electronically. It will prevent any ownership changes or major company announcements pending full investigation of your claims." I thanked her, then sat alone in my study, contemplating what would happen next. By this time tomorrow, my marriage would effectively be over. The company I had built would be in turmoil. My personal and professional lives would be irrevocably changed. And yet, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth, my truth, would finally be acknowledged. I opened my laptop one last time that evening, reviewing the comprehensive dossier I had compiled. 20 years of scientific innovation, 22 years of partnership, both personal and professional. All coming to a calculated end at tomorrow night's gala. As I closed the file, my eyes fell on the empty space in my jewelry box where my grandmother's sapphire necklace should have been. Tomorrow, if everything went according to plan, I would reclaim not just my company, but my family legacy as well. The stage was set. The evidence was prepared. All that remained was the final act. With the full scope of Gordon's betrayal laid bare, I transitioned from gathering evidence to strategic planning. This would not be an emotional confrontation. It would be a carefully orchestrated reclamation of everything that was rightfully mine. The anniversary gala presented the perfect opportunity. Gordon had planned it as the crowning moment in his corporate revision of history, the night he would officially announce Westlake's new direction with himself as the visionary founder, and Shiloh positioned for advancement. Instead, it would become the stage for his public reckoning. The timing needs to be precise, Jasmine advised during our final strategy session at her office, 3 days before the event. We met after hours when her staff had departed, minimizing the risk of anyone connecting us prematurely. Gordon plans to make his announcement at 9:15, following the champagne toast and video presentation of the company history. Which conveniently erases my role, I noted, reviewing the event schedule Gordon's assistant had shared with me. Precisely. We need to intervene before he can establish that narrative publicly, but after enough key stakeholders have witnessed Shiloh wearing your grandmother's necklace, the necklace had become a powerful symbol in our strategy. The fact that Gordon had taken a family heirloom, one with significant emotional and historical value, and given it to his mistress represented the perfect metaphor for his larger theft of my professional legacy. Miranda will arrive at 8:30, I confirmed, checking my notes. She'll bring the official FDA submission documents showing Gordon claimed sole credit for HLR 237. Jasmine nodded, making a notation in her planner. Perfect. And Dr. Kessler. He'll be there from the beginning. I've seated him at table 3 with 2 board members who've known us since the early days. The seating chart had been my responsibility, one of the few aspects of the gala planning Gordon had delegated, considering it beneath his attention. What Gordon didn't know was that I had completely rearranged his carefully planned seating assignments. Instead of isolating potential allies at peripheral tables, I had strategically positioned them throughout the ballroom, ensuring maximum visibility for what would unfold. The board members are key, Jasmine emphasized. We need them to witness everything firsthand, particularly Frederick Holloway. Fred Holloway was our most influential investor and longest-serving board member. His support had been crucial during Westlake's early years, and his opinion still carried significant weight. Gordon had cultivated Fred's friendship carefully over the years, painting himself as the visionary, while characterizing me as the capable but unambitious scientist who preferred lab work to leadership. Fred will be seated at the central table, with Gordon and me, I confirmed. He'll have a perfect view when Shiloh arrives wearing my grandmother's necklace. And the evidence packets? My assistant will distribute them to board members and key investors at precisely 9:15 minutes before Gordon's planned announcement. Each packet contains a complete documentation of my role as scientific founder, the original patent, applications, and evidence of Gordon's attempts to rewrite company history. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing across her face. You've thought of everything, Susie. I'm a scientist, I replied simply. Methodical planning is what I do. The legal strategy was equally thorough. Jasmine had prepared multiple filings that could be submitted electronically during the event, a temporary restraining order preventing any company announcements or ownership changes, an intellectual property claim reasserting my ownership of key patents, and divorce. Papers citing both infidelity and financial misconduct. Once you give the signal, Jasmine explained, my associate will file everything simultaneously. Gordon will be served with the legal papers before he can leave the gala. The potential outcomes had been carefully analyzed as well. In the best case scenario, Gordon would be removed as CEO, while I would be recognized as the rightful scientific founder and majority shareholder. In the worst case, Westlake might face a period of turbulence, but the evidence was strong enough to ensure I would retain control of my patents and receive appropriate compensation for my contributions. What about Shiloh? I asked, considering all variables as any good scientist would. The evidence suggests she was a willing participant in the attempt to push you out, Jasmine replied. However, her legal exposure is minimal compared to Gordon's. Most likely she'll be terminated for cause, particularly once the offshore accounts are revealed. I nodded, feeling no particular animosity toward the younger woman. Shiloh was ambitious and had made poor ethical choices, but Gordon was the architect of this betrayal. He had exploited her ambition just as he had exploited my trust and innovation, for years. The day before the gala, I conducted a final review of all arrangements. The guest list had been carefully curated to include journalists from key industry publications, ensuring the evening's events would be well documented. Security protocols had been verified to prevent Gordon from quickly escaping once confronted. The evidence packets had been prepared and secured with my trusted assistant, who remained unaware of their specific contents but understood the importance of their timely distribution. Most crucial was the timing of Miranda Jacobson's arrival. As the FDA Regulatory Affairs Director, her presence would lend official weight to my claims of scientific authorship. She would bring the unaltered research documentation that proved my role as the developer of HLR 237, directly contradicting Gordon's submissions. That evening, I returned home to find Gordon in an unusually good mood, humming to himself as he reviewed documents in his study. "Everything set for tomorrow?" I asked casually, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up with a smile that once would have warmed me but now seemed predatory. "Absolutely. This will be a night to remember, Susie." "I'm counting on it," I replied truthfully. Later, alone in my home office, I opened my laptop to review the presentation Gordon had prepared for the gala. His assistant had shared it with me earlier that day, supposedly for my approval, but realistically as a courtesy. Gordon had long since stopped incorporating my feedback into company materials. The presentation was exactly as I had expected. A carefully constructed narrative that positioned Gordon as the visionary founder whose scientific insight had launched Westlake Innovations. Historical photos had been selectively chosen to feature Gordon prominently, while I appeared in the palmed background or was cropped out entirely. The timeline of major developments credited him with breakthroughs that had emerged from my research. Most galling was the section on HLR 237, our newest and most promising cancer treatment. The presentation described it as the culmination of Gordon Williams' innovative approach to molecular targeting, with no mention of my 5 years of development work or the original molecular structure I had designed. I closed the laptop, a calm certainty settling over me. Tomorrow night, this false narrative would be publicly corrected. 20 years of allowing Gordon to take credit for my work was coming to an end. Before retiring to bed, I laid out the emerald green gown I had selected for the gala, a departure from the softer styles Gordon typically encouraged me to wear at public events. This dress projected authority and confidence, with a structured silhouette that commanded attention. It would be perfect for the role I would play tomorrow night, not the supportive wife or silent partner, but the rightful founder reclaiming her legacy. In the morning, Gordon left early for a pre-gala meeting that I strongly suspected involved Shiloh. I took advantage of his absence to make final preparations, confirming arrangements with Jasmine, Miranda, and Dr. Kessler. By afternoon, everything was in place. The evidence was prepared, the legal filings were ready, the witnesses were positioned. All that remained was the execution of a plan months in the making, a plan that would restore the truth about Westlake Innovations and its founding scientist. As I prepared for the most consequential evening of my professional life, I felt a curious lightness. After months of investigation and planning, after years of allowing my contributions to be minimized, I was finally taking control of my narrative. Tonight, Gordon Williams would learn what happened when he underestimated the very scientist whose work had built his empire. The day of the gala arrived with a strange sense of inevitability. After months of investigation and weeks of planning, the final hours before the confrontation required precise execution of every detail I had arranged. I awoke early, long before Gordon stirred beside me. For a moment, I watched him sleeping. This man I had once loved so deeply, with whom I had built both a life and a company. In sleep, his face relaxed into something resembling the young, ambitious MBA student I'd met at Stanford. Back then, I had believed our partnership was equal, his business acumen complementing my scientific expertise. How naive that belief seemed now. I slipped quietly from bed and made my way to my home office, where I conducted a final review of all arrangements. At 7:30 a.m., I received confirmation from Jasmine that all legal documents were prepared, and her associate would be positioned at the gala with a secure laptop, ready to file electronically at my signal. At 8:15 a.m., Miranda texted, "FDA documentation secured. Will arrive at venue at 8:30 p.m. as planned." At 9 a.m., Dr. Kessler called to confirm he had the original napkin with my molecular designs safely preserved and would bring it along with his other documentation of my early scientific leadership. By 10 a.m., the final evidence packets had been delivered to my trusted assistant with instructions for their distribution at precisely 9 p.m., 15 minutes before Gordon's planned announcement. Each packet contained original patent applications listing me as principal researcher laboratory notebooks, documenting my development of our 3 most profitable compounds email correspondence, establishing my scientific leadership financial records, showing my family's initial investment, documentation of Gordon's systematic attempt to erase my contributions, evidence of the offshore accounts he had established with Shiloh. At 11:30 a.m., I contacted the event coordinator at the Grand Meridian Hotel to confirm my revised seating arrangement had been implemented. "Yes, Mrs. Williams, everything has been arranged according to your specifications," she assured me. "The place cards have been printed with your approved layout." What Gordon didn't know was that I had strategically positioned key witnesses throughout the ballroom. Investigative journalists at Table 4, board members with the longest history at Westlake at Tables 1 and 3, and our most significant investors directly adjacent to the main table. At noon, I visited my personal safety deposit box, one Gordon knew nothing about, and retrieved the documentation I had secured there. Original incorporation papers naming me as co-founder and scientific director, my grandmother's detailed will specifically, bequeathing the sapphire necklace to me alone, and a USB drive containing backup copies of all evidence. The afternoon passed in a carefully choreographed sequence of final preparations. I visited my regular salon for hair and makeup, presenting the polished image expected of a company co-founder at our most significant corporate event. The stylist noted my choice of a more dramatic look than usual, but made no comment beyond professional suggestions. "You seem different today, Mrs. Williams," she remarked as she applied the finishing touches to my updo, an elegant style that conveyed authority rather than the softer look Gordon typically preferred. "It's an important evening," I replied simply. By 5:30 p.m., I had returned home to dress for the gala. Gordon was in his study, on a call that he quickly ended when I appeared in the doorway. I caught the tail end of his conversation. "Everything's set for tonight. By tomorrow morning, the transition will be—" He looked up, his expression shifting seamlessly into a smile. "I need to go. My wife is here." "Important call?" I asked casually, maintaining the facade of normalcy we had both perfected. "Just finalizing some details for tonight's announcement," he replied, closing his laptop. "The car will be here at 7. Will you be ready?" "I'm always prepared, Gordon," I said, the double meaning clear only to me. "You know that." In our bedroom, I opened the garment bag containing my emerald gown. The color was deliberate, green, symbolizing new growth, new beginnings. The structured silhouette with its angular neckline and precise tailoring projected authority rather than the soft femininity Gordon preferred in my public appearances. As I dressed, I mentally rehearsed the sequence of events I had planned. The evidence packets would be distributed at 9 p.m. Miranda would arrive with the FDA documentation at 8:30 p.m. Shiloh would likely appear wearing my grandmother's necklace, creating the perfect opening for confrontation. Gordon would be served with legal papers before he could leave the venue. Each step had been calculated for maximum impact and minimum opportunity for evasion. The scientist in me had designed this experiment with all variables controlled, except, of course, for human reaction. That remained the one unpredictable element. At 6:45 p.m., I secured my portfolio clutch containing selected documents I might need for reference, copies, not originals, in case Gordon attempted to destroy evidence in a moment of panic. The originals were safe with Jasmine and would be delivered to board members directly. I checked my appearance one final time, noting with satisfaction that the woman in the mirror projected confidence and authority. Gone was the accommodating scientist who had allowed herself to be relegated to the background of her own success story. Tonight, Dr. Susie Williams would reclaim her rightful place as the innovative force behind Westlake's achievements. At precisely 7 p.m., Gordon appeared in the doorway of our bedroom, handsome in his tuxedo, his expression appreciative as he surveyed my appearance. "You look stunning," he said, his tone genuine. "Though I thought you might wear the black dress we discussed." I decided emerald was more appropriate for a 20th anniversary celebration, I replied smoothly. It represents growth and new beginnings. A flash of something, uncertainty perhaps, crossed his features before his confident smile returned. New beginnings indeed. Tonight changes everything for Westlake. Yes, I agreed, meeting his eyes directly. It certainly will. The town car arrived exactly on schedule, the driver holding the door as Gordon guided me with a hand at the small of my back, a proprietary gesture that once felt protective but now seemed controlling. As we settled into the back seat, Gordon reached for my hand, his thumb tracing small circles on my palm. "Nervous?" he asked, misinterpreting my silence for anxiety. "Not at all," I replied truthfully. "I've been preparing for this night for quite some time." He smiled, clearly assuming I meant the anniversary celebration rather than the confrontation I had meticulously planned. "The board is primed for the announcement. Fred Holloway is particularly excited about the new direction." I nodded, noncommittally, knowing that Fred's excitement would transform to shock within hours. As one of our earliest investors, Fred had watched me develop the scientific innovations that launched Westlake. He had seen firsthand my contributions, though over time he had accepted Gordon's gradual repositioning of our respective roles. Tonight, Fred would be reminded of the truth he had witnessed in those early years. As our car navigated through Seattle's evening traffic toward the Grand Meridian Hotel, I mentally reviewed each piece of evidence, each witness positioned throughout the ballroom, each legal document prepared for filing. Like any good scientific experiment, tonight's events would follow a clear protocol with observable outcomes. The hypothesis: when presented with irrefutable evidence of his betrayal and theft of intellectual property, Gordon Williams would be removed as CEO of Westlake Innovations, and I would reclaim my rightful position as the company's scientific founder and majority shareholder. The experiment was about to begin. "We're almost there," Gordon noted as the downtown skyline came into view, the Grand Meridian's distinctive architecture illuminated against the evening sky. "Ready to celebrate 20 remarkable years?" I turned to look at him directly, allowing myself one moment of complete honesty before the public confrontation to come. "I'm ready to ensure that the truth about those 20 years is finally acknowledged, Gordon." Something in my tone gave him pause. His confident smile faltered slightly. As he studied my expression, perhaps sensing for the first time that something was different, But before he could respond, the car pulled up to the hotel entrance, where photographers waited to capture the arrival of Westlake's leadership. The moment had arrived. As Gordon stepped from the car and extended his hand to assist me, I took a deep breath and stepped into the role I had prepared for months to play, not the supportive wife or silent partner, but the rightful founder about to reclaim her legacy. The game was about to begin, and I held all the winning cards. The Grand E. Meridian Hotel glittered with expectation as our car pulled up to the entrance. Camera flashes greeted us. Gordon had ensured media presence for what he planned as his crowning achievement. If only he knew how the narrative would shift before the night ended. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams," called a reporter from Biotech Quarterly, as we emerged from the car. "Tonight's the big 20th anniversary. Any hints about the special announcement?" Gordon's arm slipped around my waist, a practiced gesture of unity. "You'll have to wait and see," he replied with a wink. "But I can promise it will transform Westlake's future." I smiled pleasantly, noting the subtle positioning of his statement. Not our announcement, but an implicit claim of sole ownership over whatever would be revealed. These small linguistic choices had been his specialty over the years, gradually reshaping perception of our respective roles. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed for the occasion. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables adorned with blue hydrangeas and silver accents. Westlake's corporate colors. A stage had been set up at the far end, featuring a podium and large screen for the video presentation Gordon had commissioned to showcase the company's history, his revised version of it at least. "Magnificent," I commented, genuinely impressed by the spectacle despite knowing its deceptive purpose. "Only the best for Westlake's milestone," Gordon replied, guiding me toward the receiving line where board members waited to greet us. Frederick Holloway approached first, champagne in hand. At 68, Fred remained an imposing figure in the biotech investment community, his sharp eyes missing little behind his genial exterior. "There they are," he boomed, embracing Gordon before turning to me. "Susie, you look stunning. Green suits you." Brings out the scientist's eyes. I accepted his kiss on the cheek, noting his specific mention of my scientific identity. Despite following Gordon's lead over the years, Fred had always acknowledged my intellectual contributions. "Thank you, Fred. It's good to see you. I believe we're seated together tonight." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Am I at the head table?" Gordon told me I'd be with the Peterson Group. "Last-minute change," I explained smoothly. I thought it fitting to have our longest-standing investor close by for such a historic evening. Gordon's hand tightened almost imperceptibly at my waist. The seating arrangements had been his carefully planned strategy, isolating potential allies while surrounding himself with newer board members who knew only his version of Westlake's history. "Wonderful," Fred exclaimed, oblivious to the tension. "I have some stories about the early days I'd love to reminisce about." "Perfect," I replied, meeting Gordon's eyes with innocence. "Those foundational stories should be remembered accurately, don't you think?" Before Gordon could respond, we were swept into conversations with other arriving guests. Board members, research scientists, industry partners. The ballroom quickly filled with the network of relationships that had fueled Westlake's growth. I moved through the crowd with practiced ease, the dutiful co-founder accepting congratulations while Gordon worked the room with his trademark charisma. To casual observers, we appeared the perfect power couple. He the visionary leader, I the supportive partner. How thoroughly he had constructed that narrative over the years, and how willingly I had allowed it to solidify. At 8:15 p.m., I checked my watch discreetly. Miranda would arrive in 15 minutes. The evidence packets were ready for distribution at 9 Todd. Everything was proceeding according to schedule. As guests found their tables, I confirmed that my revised seating chart had been implemented correctly. Fred Holloway was indeed at our table, along with Dr. Lawrence Kessler and the science correspondent from the Wall Street Journal. a deliberate grouping of individuals who had witnessed various stages of Westlake's true development. Gordon, occupied with last-minute presentation checks, remained unaware of how thoroughly I had rearranged his carefully orchestrated evening. He returned to my side as the formal program was about to begin, looking completely satisfied with himself. "Perfect turnout," he murmured, surveying the crowd of nearly 300 industry leaders, investors, and media representatives. "Everyone who matters in biotech is here tonight." "Yes," I agreed quietly. The perfect audience. The evening proceeded with the predictable rhythm of corporate celebrations. The catering director announced dinner service. Wine flowed freely. Conversations buzzed with anticipation of the mysterious announcement Gordon had been hinting at for weeks. At our table, Dr. Kessler engaged Fred Holloway in reminiscences about Westlake's earliest days. "Remember that first lab?" Larry asked. "Barely bigger than a storage closet. Susie working until midnight on that initial protein targeting model." "Revolutionary approach," Fred nodded, turning to me. "I still remember when you first explained it. Made complex biochemistry sound like common sense. That's when I knew investing in Westlake was the right decision." Gordon smoothly interjected, "We've come a long way from that closet-sized lab, haven't we? From Susie's early contributions to the global enterprise we've built." Early contributions. Another subtle linguistic shift, relegating my foundational work to ancient history, rather than the ongoing scientific innovation that had built and sustained the company. At precisely 8:30 p.m., I noticed Miranda Jacobson entering the ballroom. The FDA Regulatory Affairs Director moved with confident purpose, nodding professionally to industry contacts as she made her way to her assigned table, strategically positioned. Within clear view of the main stage, our eyes met briefly across the room, her slight nod confirming that she had brought the documentation we had discussed. The unaltered research records that proved my development of HLR-237, contradicting Gordon's fraudulent submissions claiming sole credit. Gordon followed my gaze, his expression tightening momentarily when he spotted Miranda. "I didn't realize she would be here tonight," he said, voice carefully neutral. "I thought the FDA meetings were scheduled for next week." "Miranda expressed interest in our anniversary celebration," I replied calmly. Given her role in HLR-237's approval process, it seemed appropriate to include her. He studied my face for a moment, perhaps sensing something in my tone. "Of course," he finally agreed, though a new watchfulness had entered his expression. At 8:45 p.m., my assistant quietly approached our table, bending to whisper in my ear, though the message was for show. "Everything is prepared for distribution. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Williams." I thanked her with a nod, aware of Gordon's increasingly suspicious glances. The controlled experiment was approaching its critical phase, the moment when variables could no longer be contained, and reactions would become unpredictable. As the main course was being cleared, I excused myself, ostensibly to freshen up before the presentations began. In reality, I needed to confirm the final pieces of our strategy were in place. In the elegant privacy of the ladies' lounge, I sent a text to Jasmine. "Proceeding as planned. Evidence distribution at 9 con. Be ready to your file at my signal." Her response came immediately. "All documents prepared. Associate in position with secure connection." I checked my appearance in the mirror, adjusting my emerald earrings, another deliberate choice, as they had been a gift from my parents upon completing my doctorate, representing my identity as a scientist before I had met Gordon. As I prepared to return to the ballroom, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel Wright. "Subject 2 has entered the building, wearing the item as predicted." Shiloh had arrived, and she was wearing my grandmother's necklace, just as I had anticipated. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what would come next. The confrontation was minutes away now. 20 years of allowing my contributions to be minimized. 22 years of partnership with a man who had systematically betrayed both my trust and my intellectual property. It was about to end. Returning to the ballroom, I paused in the doorway, taking in the scene before me. Gordon at our table, checking his watch impatiently. Miranda Jacobson reviewing documents at her seat, my assistant positioning the evidence packets for distribution. Dr. Kessler engaged in earnest conversation with Fred Holloway, likely laying groundwork for the revelations to come. And there, just entering from the opposite doorway, was Shiloh Patterson. Her black gown was clearly designer, its plunging neckline the perfect showcase for my grandmother's sapphire necklace. The blue stones caught the light with each step she took, a flagrant display of Gordon's most personal betrayal. I moved purposefully back to our table, my timing precise. The evidence packets would be distributed in exactly 10 minutes. The confrontation, that would reshape Westlake's future and reclaim my legacy, was about to begin. "There you are," Gordon said as I took my seat. "Perfect timing. The presentation starts in 15 minutes. "Yes," I agreed, my gaze tracking Shiloh as she made her way through the tables. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian had reached its full capacity. 300 of biotech's elite gathered to celebrate Westlake's 20th anniversary. Crystal glasses clinked, conversations hummed, and anticipation for Gordon's special announcement created an electric undercurrent throughout the space. I watched as Gordon greeted late arrivals, his confidence evident in every gesture. He truly believed tonight would cement his revised history of Westlake, with himself as the visionary founder and scientific innovator. The presentation queued up on the ballroom's massive screens told exactly that story, carefully edited to minimize my contributions and position him as the driving force behind our success. What Gordon didn't realize was that I had made several critical adjustments to the evening's arrangements beyond the seating chart. The open bar had been positioned with clear sightlines to our main table, ensuring Shiloh would be visible to all key witnesses when she inevitably approached. The lighting had been subtly adjusted to ensure the sapphire necklace would be unmistakable under the chandeliers. The sound system had been tested to carry voices clearly throughout the space. Every detail had been considered for maximum impact. At precisely 8:52 p.m., I noticed my assistant beginning her discreet circuit of the room, placing manila envelopes at specific place settings, board members, key investors, and selected journalists. Each envelope contained the evidence packet I had prepared, 20 years of documentation proving my role as Westlake's scientific founder and revealing Gordon's systematic attempt to erase my contributions. Gordon, engaged in conversation with the president of the Biotech Industry Association, remained oblivious to this distribution. His focus was entirely on the presentation he would soon deliver, the carefully crafted narrative that would position him as the innovative genius behind Westlake's success. At 8:55 p.m., I observed Shiloh making her way to the bar, my grandmother's, sapphire necklace gleaming against her skin. She moved with the confidence of someone who believed victory was imminent, ordering a champagne while surveying the room. Her eyes found Gordon briefly, a private smile passing between them before he deliberately turned his attention elsewhere. Their discretion was practiced but imperfect. Several guests had already noticed the exchange, including Frederick Holloway, whose eyebrows raised slightly as he glanced between Gordon, Shiloh, and me. I checked my watch. 5 minutes until the evidence packets would be opened. 7 minutes. Until Gordon would step to the podium to begin his presentation. The timing had to be precise, allowing board members to review the evidence, but intervening before Gordon could establish his false narrative publicly. "Nearly time for your big moment," I said to Gordon as he returned to our table. "Everything ready for the presentation?" "Absolutely," he replied, straightening his cufflinks, a nervous habit he'd had since business school. 20 years of innovation, with our biggest breakthrough yet to be announced. HLR 237's fast-track approval, I stated, rather than asked, I. Flicker of surprise crossed his features. Among other developments, the FDA confirmation came through yesterday. "Yes, I know. Miranda mentioned it when we spoke last week. Gordon's confident smile faltered slightly. You've been in contact with Miranda? Of course, I replied calmly. As HLR 237's developer, I've maintained close communication with the regulatory team throughout the approval process. His expression hardened momentarily before he recovered. We're all excited about what this means for Westlake's future. The restructuring will be quite different from what you've planned, I finished quietly, meeting his eyes directly. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his features, the first indication that he sensed something wasn't proceeding according to his script. Before he could respond, Fred Holloway leaned across the table. Gordon, I've been meaning to ask about these offshore accounts mentioned in this document, Fred said, holding up a page from the evidence packet my assistant had discreetly delivered, particularly the joint holdings with... He glanced toward the bar, where Shiloh stood sipping champagne, my grandmother's necklace catching the light. What document? Gordon asked sharply, reaching for the paper in Fred's hand. As Gordon scanned the page, I watched the blood drain from his face. His eyes darted from the document to me, comprehension dawning that this evening was not unfolding as he had planned. Where did you get this? He demanded, voice low but intense. I believe identical packets have been distributed to all board members and key investors, I replied calmly. They contain comprehensive documentation of Westlake's true founding history, my role as the scientific innovator behind our major breakthroughs, and evidence of your systematic attempts to rewrite that history. Gordon's eyes darted around the room, noting with growing alarm that several board members were indeed reviewing documents with increasing concern. The science correspondent from the Wall Street Journal was taking rapid notes. Miranda Jacobson was engaged in serious conversation with two FDA colleagues, additional documentation spread before them. This is absurd, Gordon hissed, struggling to maintain his composure. A desperate attempt to reclaim my rightful place as Westlake's scientific founder? I finished for him. To correct the historical record you've been systematically falsifying? The evidence speaks for itself, Gordon. At that moment, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly, the prearranged signal that the formal program would begin in 2 minutes. Gordon was scheduled to approach the podium, introduce the video presentation of Westlake's history, and then make his announcement about the company's new direction, a direction that would have solidified his control while eliminating mine. Ladies and gentlemen, called the event coordinator from beside the stage. If you would please take your seats, the evening's program will begin momentarily. Gordon stood abruptly, straightening his jacket with hands that trembled slightly. This can be handled privately, he said tersely. There's no need to create a public spectacle. Privacy has served your purposes quite well over the years, I replied, remaining seated. Tonight is about transparency, about the truth finally being acknowledged. His eyes hardened, the charming facade dropping completely. You have no idea what you're doing. The company won't survive this kind of disruption. Westlake was built on my scientific innovations, I countered evenly. It will not only survive having the truth revealed, it will thrive under authentic leadership. Gordon leaned closer, his voice a harsh whisper. 22 years of marriage thrown away for what? Revenge? Not revenge, I corrected him. Justice. For myself, and for the scientific record. A movement at the edge of my vision caught my attention. Shiloh was approaching our table, champagne glass in hand, my grandmother's sapphire necklace prominently displayed against her skin. Her timing couldn't have been more perfect if I had orchestrated it myself, which in a way I had. The trap was now fully set. As Shiloh reached our table, every key witness I had positioned throughout the ballroom had a clear view. Frederick Holloway, Dr. Lawrence Kessler, Miranda Jacobson, the science correspondent from the Wall Street Journal, and board members from every phase of Westlake's growth. Gordon, Shiloh said, her voice carrying in the momentary lull of conversation before the program began. "I thought you might want to review these projections before your announcement." She held out a folder, a transparent excuse to approach our table. All eyes at our table fixed on the sapphire necklace gleaming at her throat. My grandmother's heirloom, reported missing months ago, now prominently displayed on the neck of my husband's mistress at our company's anniversary gala. Frederick Holloway's eyes widened in recognition. "Isn't that your grandmother's necklace, Susie? The one from Vienna that your grandfather brought over during the war?" A hush fell over our immediate vicinity as guests at nearby tables turned toward the unfolding drama. Gordon's face had gone pale, his eyes darting between Shiloh, the necklace, and the evidence packets now being reviewed by increasingly concerned board members. "Yes," I confirmed, my voice clear and steady. "My grandmother's sapphire necklace, which mysteriously disappeared from my jewelry box 3 months ago. The one Gordon helped me search for throughout our home, suggesting it might have been lost during our trip to Vancouver." Shiloh's confident smile faltered, her hand moving instinctively to touch the central stone. "I don't understand," she said, looking to Gordon for explanation. "You said this was a gift, that it belonged to your mother." "How interesting," I remarked, opening my portfolio clutch to remove a document. "Especially since I have here the original bequest from my grandmother's will, specifically leaving the sapphire necklace to me alone, along with a recent appraisal Gordon commissioned, listing himself as the sole owner." The trap had closed perfectly. As conversations hushed throughout the ballroom, all attention focused on our table, where the evening's true drama was unfolding, quite different from the carefully scripted program Gordon had planned. The stage was set for the final confrontation. A tense silence had fallen over our immediate vicinity, rippling outward as more guests turned to observe the unfolding drama. Gordon's face had settled into a mask of controlled panic, the expression I had seen during our most challenging business crises, when he was rapidly calculating escape routes. "There seems to be some confusion," he said smoothly, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Shiloh, perhaps you could give us a moment. We'll discuss the projections after my presentation." But Shiloh remained frozen in place, her hand still touching the sapphire at her throat, eyes darting between Gordon and me as comprehension dawned. "You told me this was your mother's," she repeated, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed space. "That it had been in your family for generations." "It has been in a family for generations," I confirmed, my tone conversational despite the tension crackling through the air. "My family. My grandmother received it from my grandfather when they fled Vienna in 1938. It's one of the few heirlooms that survived their escape from Europe." Frederick Holloway was studying the necklace with newfound intensity. "I remember Eliza wearing that at Westlake's 10th anniversary," he said, referring to my grandmother who had lived to see the company's early success. "She told me the story of how your grandfather had protected it during their journey to America." Gordon's jaw tightened as he realized this particular lie could not be easily explained away. The necklace was too distinctive, too well known among our longtime associates. "This is hardly the appropriate venue for a domestic discussion," he attempted, glancing meaningfully at the stage where the event coordinator was waiting to begin the program. "We have guests expecting a presentation." "Oh, they'll get one," I assured him, my voice steady. "Just not the carefully edited version of Westlake's history you've prepared." I turned to address Shiloh directly, feeling a strange sense of calm, as years of suppressed truth finally surfaced. "The necklace is only a symbol of a much larger theft, Shiloh. Did Gordon tell you about his plans to remove me from Westlake's leadership? Or how he's been systematically taking credit for my scientific innovations for years?" Her expression confirmed my suspicion. She had been a willing participant in the professional betrayal, even if she'd been deceived about the personal aspects. "Susie, this is beneath you," Gordon said sharply, his charm evaporating as he recognized the threat to his carefully constructed narrative. Whatever marital issues we're having shouldn't impact the company's milestone celebration. This isn't about our marriage, I countered. It's about intellectual theft and corporate fraud. The evidence packets being reviewed by the board right now contain documented proof that you've been systematically erasing my contributions to Westlake while claiming sole credit for innovations that came from my research. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd as board members and investors continued examining the documents my assistant had distributed. From the corner of my eye, I saw Miranda Jacobson approaching our table, additional files in hand. "Dr. Williams," she said formally, addressing me rather than Gordon. "I've brought the original FDA submission documents you requested, showing the discrepancies between the research documentation and the claims made about HLR 237's development." Gordon's face went from flushed to ashen as Miranda placed the files on the table. These were official regulatory documents, his fraudulent claims of sole scientific development submitted to a federal agency. "There must be some misunderstanding," he attempted, reaching for the files. Miranda smoothly intercepted his hand. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Williams. The FDA has flagged these submissions for comprehensive review due to significant concerns about attribution and potential falsification of development records." Frederick Holloway had been silently reviewing the evidence packet, his expression growing increasingly grave. As one of biotech's most respected investors and Westlake's longest-serving board member, his reaction would influence others significantly. "Gordon," he said finally, his tone measured but severe, "these documents show a pattern of deliberate misattribution spanning years. Research clearly conducted by Susie has been systematically reframed as your work in official company materials. Business communications often simplify complex collaborative processes," Gordon responded, falling back on the explanation he had used successfully for years. "Susie has always preferred to focus on the science rather than public recognition." "That's not what these emails suggest," Fred countered, holding up a page from the evidence packet. "This correspondence explicitly discusses how to minimize Susie's visibility in connection with HLR 237's development while positioning Gordon as the innovative force behind the compound." Shiloh shifted uncomfortably, clearly recognizing her own words quoted in the email exchange. As head of financial operations, she had been instrumental in implementing Gordon's systematic erasure of my contributions. "The offshore accounts are particularly concerning," Fred continued, turning to another document. "Joint holdings between you and Ms. Patterson, funded through what appeared to be diverted company resources." Gordon's expression hardened as he realized the comprehensive nature of the evidence arrayed against him. His gaze locked with mine, fury and disbelief warring in his eyes. "You've been planning this for months," he said quietly, all while pretending everything was normal. "I learned from the best," I replied simply. "You've been planning to push me out of my own company for years, all while I continued building the scientific innovations that drove our success." Dr. Lawrence Kessler chose this moment to approach our table, carrying a preserved plastic sleeve containing the original napkin from that cafe near Stanford, the one where I had first sketched the molecular pathway that became our foundational technology. "I believe this belongs in the discussion," he said, placing it carefully on the table. The original concept for what became RL 519, in Susie's handwriting, dated and witnessed by myself and Dr. Yamamoto from biochemistry. Gordon wasn't even present that day. The napkin, such a small thing physically yet massive in its significance, seemed to break whatever remaining composure Gordon had been maintaining. "This is a coordinated attack," he said, his voice rising as he looked around at the witnesses I had carefully positioned throughout the ballroom. "A vindictive response to personal issues that has no place in a corporate setting." Shiloh, still, standing awkwardly by our table, attempted to retreat, but I addressed her directly. "The necklace, Shiloh. I'd like it returned now." Her hand flew protectively to the sapphires. "I can't just—" "Here, In front of everyone. It seems fitting, I observed calmly. Since you chose to wear a stolen family heirloom to its rightful owner's company celebration. The event coordinator approached nervously, aware that the evening's carefully planned program was derailing spectacularly. Mr. Williams, we're running behind schedule. Should we begin the presentation? Gordon glanced at the screens where his revisionist history of Westlake waited to be shown, a corporate mythology that positioned him as the visionary founder and scientific innovator while relegating me to a supporting role. I believe we'll need to adjust tonight's program, Frederick Holloway interjected before Gordon could respond. In light of these concerning revelations, the board will require an emergency session before any announcements regarding Westlake's future direction. Gordon's carefully orchestrated evening was unraveling thread by thread. The board members he had cultivated were now reviewing documented evidence of his systematic deception. The FDA representative was openly acknowledging concerns about his fraudulent submissions. His mistress stood exposed, literally wearing evidence of his personal betrayal around her neck. And at the center of it all, I remained calm, methodical, the scientist who had finally gathered sufficient evidence to prove her hypothesis, that Gordon Williams had been systematically stealing credit for my innovations while plotting to remove me from the company I had built. Perhaps, I suggested into the uncomfortable silence, we should address the actual truth about Westlake's founding and scientific development before proceeding with any announcements about its future. All eyes turned to me, board members, investors, industry colleagues, and journalists, waiting for the real story of Westlake Innovations to finally be told. The ballroom had fallen completely silent, the celebratory atmosphere replaced by tense anticipation. All eyes were on our table, where 20 years of carefully constructed mythology about Westlake Innovations was unraveling in real time. I stood slowly, smoothing the emerald silk of my gown, a deliberate gesture to collect my thoughts before addressing the assembled witnesses. This moment had been months in planning, yet the emotional reality of it struck me with unexpected force. For those who don't know the full story, I began, my voice calm but carrying clearly through the hushed space. Westlake Innovations began, not in a corporate boardroom, but in a biochemistry laboratory at Stanford University. The foundational technology, our approach to receptor-ligand targeting, wasn't conceived in a business plan. It emerged from my postdoctoral research on protein-binding mechanisms. Gordon remained seated, his expression frozen in a mask of barely contained fury as I systematically dismantled the narrative he had spent years constructing. The initial investment that launched this company didn't come from venture capital, I continued. It came from my family, $250,000 from the trust my grandparents established for my education and research. The same grandparents who escaped Europe with little more than their lives and a sapphire necklace that now adorns Ms. Patterson's throat. Shiloh's hand moved instinctively to cover the necklace, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and defiance. The documentation being reviewed by our board members, I continued, gesturing to the evidence packets, provides irrefutable proof of my role as Westlake's scientific founder. Original patent applications listing me as principal researcher. Laboratory notebooks documenting the development of our 3 most profitable compounds. Correspondence confirming my leadership of the research that built this company. I turned to face Gordon directly. What these materials also document is a systematic attempt to erase my contributions, to rewrite Westlake's history with yourself as the sole innovative force. This is absurd, Gordon finally responded, rising to his feet. A vindictive distortion, driven by personal grievances. Is it vindictive to expect credit for my own scientific discoveries? I asked calmly. Is it a distortion to present the actual research records rather than the revised history you've been constructing? Frederick Holloway cleared his throat. I've known both of you since Westlake's inception, he said, addressing the room. And while Gordon has been the public face of the company, anyone present during those early years can confirm that the scientific innovations came from Susie's research. Business leadership is equally important to scientific innovation, Gordon countered, attempting to regain control of the narrative. Brilliant research means nothing without the vision to bring it to market. I couldn't agree more, I acknowledged. Our partnership was initially successful precisely because it balanced those elements. What I cannot accept is the systematic erasure of my contributions and the fraudulent claims of scientific development submitted to regulatory agencies. Miranda Jacobson stepped forward, FDA documentation in hand. The submissions for HLR 237's approval contain concerning discrepancies, she confirmed. Development records have been selectively edited to minimize Dr. Williams' role while positioning Mr. Williams as the primary scientific developer, a claim contradicted by the original research documentation. Gordon's confident facade was cracking visibly as he realized the comprehensive nature of the evidence arrayed against him. His eyes darted to Shiloh, who had begun slowly retreating from our table, one hand still protectively covering my grandmother's necklace. "Susie," he said, his voice lowered in a final attempt at controlling the situation, "we should discuss this privately. This public spectacle serves no one's interests, least of all the company's. Privacy has served your purposes for far too long," I replied, deliberately echoing the words I had rehearsed for months. The truth about Westlake deserves to be acknowledged publicly, as does the attempted theft of my scientific legacy. The event coordinator hovered anxiously at the edge of our group, clearly uncertain how to proceed with the planned program. The screen still displayed the opening slide of Gordon's presentation. Westlake Innovations, 20 Years of Visionary Leadership. Dr. Lawrence Kessler spoke up from his seat nearby. "I suggest a more accurate title would be 20 Years of Unacknowledged Scientific Innovation," he observed dryly. A murmur of uncomfortable laughter rippled through the assembled guests. The tension in the room was palpable as board members continued reviewing the evidence packets, their expressions growing increasingly grave. "The offshore accounts are particularly troubling," noted Regina Blackwell, our newest board member and former SEC attorney. "These financial structures appear designed to redirect company resources while diluting Dr. Williams's ownership stake." Gordon's face had gone from flushed to ashen as the conversation shifted from scientific attribution to potential financial impropriety. "Those accounts were established for legitimate business purposes," he attempted, but his explanation sounded hollow, even to my ears. "Including the joint holdings with Ms. Patterson?" Regina asked pointedly, indicating Shiloh, who had now retreated to the edge of our group. "The documentation suggests these accounts were funded through company resources while being held in your personal names." The systematic dismantling of Gordon's carefully constructed facade was unfolding exactly as I had planned. Each piece of evidence building upon the last, each witness adding credibility to my claims. What I hadn't anticipated was the profound sense of validation that washed over me as 20 years of minimized contributions were finally acknowledged in this public forum. The moment had come to present the irrefutable evidence I had methodically gathered over months of investigation. With deliberate calm, I opened my portfolio clutch and removed several key documents, copies, not originals, which remained securely with Jasmine Sanderson. "For those requiring more specific evidence," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, "I'd like to direct your attention to 3 particular documents." I held up the first page, a scanned copy of the original patent application for RL 5119, our first blockbuster compound. "This is the initial patent filing from 2003, clearly listing me as principal researcher and primary developer of the molecular structure that became Westlake's foundational technology." I passed the document to Frederick Holloway, who examined it carefully before passing it along to other board members. Gordon remained silent, his earlier attempts at control now replaced by grim resignation as he recognized the thoroughness of my documentation. "The second piece of evidence," I continued, retrieving another document from my portfolio, "is Gordon's own acknowledgement of my scientific leadership. A letter he wrote to Dr. Kessler 10 years ago, thanking him for recognizing Susie's extraordinary talent and guiding the breakthrough research that made Westlake possible. Dr. Kessler nodded confirmation as I read from the letter, which was displayed on company letterhead with Gordon's distinctive signature at the bottom. The third document, I said, removing the final page, is perhaps the most concerning. It's an email exchange between Gordon and Shiloh Patterson from 4 months ago, explicitly discussing how to minimize Susie's visibility in connection with HLR 237, while positioning Gordon as the innovative force behind the compound. Shiloh visibly flinched as her own words were read aloud, her hand still protectively covering my grandmother's necklace. This correspondence, I continued, directly contradicts the scientific attribution in our FDA submissions. Submissions that Miranda Jacobson has confirmed contain selective editing of research records to support fraudulent claims of development. The weight of evidence was having its intended effect. Board members exchanged concerned glances. Investors whispered urgently to one another. The journalists present were taking rapid notes, sensing the significant industry story unfolding before them. Regina Blackwell, the former SEC attorney on our board, spoke up again. These allegations go beyond scientific attribution disputes. They potentially constitute securities fraud if company materials have systematically misrepresented the source of intellectual property that drives valuation. Gordon finally found his voice, though it lacked his usual confident resonance. These are complex misunderstandings being presented without context. Scientific development is collaborative by nature. Is this your handwriting, Gordon? Frederick Holloway interrupted, holding up a page from the evidence packet. These notes on the corporate restructuring plan specifically outline steps to transition ownership control while minimizing SW's legal recourse. Gordon's jaw tightened as he recognized his own notes, documents I had discovered in the safe deposit box he believed I knew nothing about. Corporate succession planning is standard practice, he attempted, but his explanation rang hollow even to my ears. Succession planning typically doesn't involve offshore accounts jointly held with subordinates, Regina observed dryly, glancing meaningfully toward Shiloh. The evidence was having precisely the impact I had anticipated, not just establishing my scientific contributions, but revealing the coordinated attempt to deprive me of both credit and control. Miranda Jacobson stepped forward again, adding her professional authority to the growing consensus. The FDA takes attribution in scientific submissions extremely seriously, she stated. Claiming credit for another researcher's work in regulatory filings potentially constitutes fraud. These submissions were approved through proper corporate channels, Gordon countered, desperation edging into his tone. By bypassing the primary researcher? Miranda asked pointedly. Our records indicate Dr. Williams was deliberately excluded from review processes where her development work was attributed to you. Each piece of evidence built upon the last, creating a comprehensive picture of systematic deception spanning years. Gordon's carefully constructed narrative was collapsing under the weight of documented fact. Dr. Lawrence Kessler provided the final devastating piece of evidence, carefully unfolding the preserved napkin where I had first sketched the molecular pathway that became our core technology. This, he said, holding it up for all to see, is the actual moment of innovation that launched Westlake. Susie's insight in her handwriting, witnessed by myself and Dr. Yamamoto on April 12, 2002. Gordon wasn't even present when this breakthrough occurred. A heavy silence fell over the ballroom as the cumulative evidence rendered Gordon's position untenable. His planned announcement about Westlake's new direction, a direction that would have formalized my removal, now seemed like a bitter joke. Frederick Holloway, representing the board's longest institutional memory, finally broke the silence. In light of these extremely serious allegations and the substantial documentation supporting them, I believe the board must convene immediately to address both the historical record and the current leadership structure of Westlake Innovations. Several Board members nodded in agreement, their expressions grave as they continued reviewing the evidence packets. Any formal announcements about the company's future direction, Fred continued, glancing meaningfully at Gordon, must be postponed pending full investigation of these matters. The corporate coup Gordon had planned, the public cementing of his revised history, and the announcement of a restructuring that would have marginalized me completely, had been effectively neutralized. In its place stood the truth, documented, witnessed, and finally acknowledged. The transformation in the room was palpable. What had begun as a celebration of Gordon's carefully constructed mythology had become a public reckoning, a complete reversal of power dynamics occurring in real time before biotech's elite. Gordon stood rigidly beside our table, the commanding presence he had cultivated for decades now diminished by the weight of evidence against him. His eyes darted between board members, seeking allies where moments before he had assumed only loyalty existed. Frederick Holloway had already turned, his attention fully to me, his expression reflecting a complicated mixture of respect and regret. "Susie," he said, voice deliberately pitched to carry to those nearby, "the board needs to formally address these revelations. As our longest-serving member, I'm calling an emergency session for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I've taken the liberty of preparing comprehensive documentation for each board member," I replied, nodding toward my assistant who stood ready with additional materials, including the unaltered research records and patent documentation establishing my role as principal scientific developer of Westlake's core technologies. Regina Blackwell, the former SEC attorney, was already on her phone, stepping away to make what I suspected was a call to legal counsel. The financial implications of Gordon's actions, particularly the offshore accounts shared with Shiloh, had clearly triggered her regulatory concerns. Gordon made one final attempt to regain control. "This is a calculated attack," he said, his voice strained despite his effort to project authority. "A personal vendetta dressed up as corporate concern. Westlake needs stability, not chaos driven by marital disputes." "This isn't about our marriage," I corrected calmly. "It's about scientific integrity, proper attribution, and corporate governance. The evidence speaks for itself." As if on cue, Jasmine Sanderson's assistant approached our table, legal documents in hand. "Mr. Williams," she said formally, "you've been served with notice of a temporary restraining order preventing any changes to Westlake's ownership structure or intellectual property assignments pending full investigation of these matters." Gordon accepted the papers with a hand that trembled slightly, the final confirmation that his carefully orchestrated evening had been thoroughly dismantled. At the edge of our group, Shiloh had been watching the proceedings with growing alarm. Her hand remained protectively over my grandmother's necklace, but her expression had shifted from confidence to calculation. "The necklace, Shiloh," I said quietly but firmly, extending my hand. "It belongs to my family, not to Gordon, and certainly not to you." For a moment she hesitated, glancing toward Gordon as if expecting him to intervene. But his attention was fixed on the legal documents in his hand, his face ashen as he absorbed the comprehensive nature of the restraining order. With visible reluctance, Shiloh reached behind her neck to unfasten the clasp. The sapphire necklace, my grandmother's legacy, a symbol of survival and perseverance through dark times, slid from her throat into my waiting palm. As my fingers closed around the cool platinum and sapphires, I felt a profound sense of reclamation washing over me. Not just of a family heirloom, but of my professional identity, my scientific legacy, and my rightful place as Westlake's innovative founder. The power had shifted completely. The remainder of the evening unfolded with a surreal quality. The formal program had been quietly abandoned. The celebration transformed into intense clusters of conversation throughout the ballroom as news of the confrontation spread rapidly. Board members huddled with legal counsel. Investors engaged in urgent discussions about implications for Westlake's governance. Journalists circulated discreetly, gathering perspectives for what would undoubtedly become major industry news by morning. Gordon had retreated to a corner with his personal attorney, their expressions grave as they reviewed the legal documents Jasmine's team had prepared. The temporary restraining order effectively prevented him from making any changes to company structure or intellectual property, neutralizing whatever plans he had developed for tonight's announcement. Shiloh had disappeared entirely, slipping away after surrendering my grandmother's necklace. Her abrupt departure spoke volumes about the transactional nature of their relationship. Her ambition had aligned with Gordon's plans only as long as victory seemed assured. "You've been planning this for months," Frederick Holloway observed, joining me at a quiet table where I had retreated to compose myself after the confrontation. "Methodical, comprehensive." "I'm a scientist," I replied simply. "Thorough research and documentation are second nature." Fred nodded, a hint of admiration in his expression. "I owe you an apology, Susie. I saw the gradual changes in how your contributions were presented over the years, but I never questioned Gordon's narrative. He was convincing, I acknowledged. The revisions happened slowly, a subtle shift in language here, a reframing of leadership there. By the time it became blatant, the revised history had already been widely accepted. Dr. Lawrence Kessler joined us, settling his aging frame into a chair with a satisfied sigh. "Justice delayed, but not denied," he remarked. "Your grandmother would be proud, Susie. She always said you had her spine." I touched the sapphire necklace, now safely returned to my possession. She taught me that some legacies are worth fighting for. As the evening wound down, Miranda Jacobson approached with her FDA colleagues. "We'll need your complete research records for HLR 237, she said without preamble. "The approval will proceed. Patients need this treatment, but the attribution issues must be thoroughly addressed." "You'll have everything tomorrow," I assured her. "The original notebooks, development timelines, the complete documentation." She nodded briskly. "Good. The scientific record matters, Dr. Williams, not just for credit, but for the integrity of the development process itself." By midnight, the ballroom had largely emptied. The anniversary celebration concluded not with Gordon's planned triumph, but with the beginning of a significant corporate reckoning. Tomorrow would bring emergency board meetings, media inquiries, and the formal beginning of investigations into both scientific attribution and financial impropriety. As I gathered my belongings, I noticed Gordon standing alone by the stage, staring at the darkened screens that would have displayed his revisionist history of Westlake. 22 years of marriage, 20 years of partnership building a pharmaceutical empire, all ending not with the private dissolution I had once imagined, but with public exposure of his systematic betrayal. For a moment, watching him from across the empty ballroom, I felt an unexpected flash of something almost like pity. He had achieved genuine success. His business acumen and leadership had indeed contributed significantly to Westlake's growth. But it hadn't been enough. He had needed to claim my achievements as well, to erase my contributions in service of his ego. The reclamation of my scientific legacy had been necessary and just, but as I prepared to leave the venue where our professional partnership had effectively ended, I recognized that the personal aftermath still lay ahead. The dissolution of a marriage that had once held genuine promise, before ambition had corrupted its foundation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, for the first time in years, I would sleep knowing that the truth about Westlake Innovations and my role as its scientific founder had finally been acknowledged. 6 months after the fateful anniversary gala, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office, gazing across the Seattle skyline as afternoon light glinted off Puget Sound. The view was different. I'd moved from the west wing of Westlake's headquarters to the executive suite on the top floor. But the scientific journals lining the bookshelves and the molecular models displayed on my conference table maintained the connection between my research roots and my new role. The corporate transformation had been swift and comprehensive. The emergency board meeting the morning after the gala had resulted in Gordon's immediate suspension, pending full investigation. Within 3 weeks, faced with irrefutable evidence of both scientific misattribution and financial impropriety, he had resigned rather than face formal removal. The legal aftermath continued. Our divorce proceedings were complex given the intertwining of personal and professional assets, but the corporate resolution had been decisive. I had been formally acknowledged as Westlake's scientific founder and appointed Chief Innovation Officer, working alongside a new CEO selected for their transparent leadership approach and respect for scientific integrity. The sapphire necklace, now restored to its rightful place in my jewelry collection, had become something of a personal talisman. I wore it to the press conference where Westlake announced the FDA's approval of HLR 237, with proper attribution of its development to my research team. A knock at my door interrupted my reflection. "Dr. Williams, the research presentation is about to begin," my new assistant announced. I nodded, gathering my tablet. Today's meeting would showcase promising results from Donna Marshall's team, Donna having been promoted to the financial operations position that should have been hers years ago, replacing Shiloh, who had resigned the day after the gala. The boardroom had a different energy now. Where Gordon had fostered a culture of competition and territorial defensiveness, our new leadership emphasized collaborative innovation and transparent attribution. Research presentations included recognition of every team member's contributions, a simple but profound shift in corporate culture. As I took my seat at the conference table, I noticed Frederick Holloway watching me with genuine respect, a marked change from the patronizing regard he had once shown when Gordon positioned me as his supportive scientist wife. "Before we begin," Fred said as the room settled, "I'd like to acknowledge that HLR 237's market launch has exceeded even our optimistic projections. Congratulations, Susie. Your innovation is changing lives exactly as you envisioned." I accepted the acknowledgement with a nod, feeling a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with corporate politics and everything to do with scientific purpose. Westlake had always been about developing treatments that made meaningful differences in patients' lives. That mission remained unchanged, even as the company's leadership and culture had transformed. After the meeting, I returned to my office to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a framed photograph from Westlake's earliest days. Our original team of 6 researchers in that tiny first laboratory, with me clearly leading a discussion at a whiteboard covered in molecular diagrams. The note accompanying it read, simply, "For the historical record, with respect and admiration, Larry Kessler." I placed the photograph prominently on my desk, a reminder of where Westlake had truly begun and the authentic narrative that had finally been acknowledged. The company would move forward under new leadership and with renewed integrity, while I had reclaimed both my professional legacy and my personal autonomy. The sapphire necklace caught the late afternoon light from its display case across the room, a family heirloom that had survived difficult journeys across generations, much like the truth itself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.